Some people run from the darkness. Some people run to the light. I ran away in a fever. I ran like a fool in the night. And some have a path all laid out for them, and someone to help with their load. I had nothing and no one, just a dream down an uncertain road. Sometimes I lie on beaches wishing on the stars, and sometimes when I got lonely I'd wander through the bars. And when things got so tough, I'd bow my head and pray, thank God. I met a few good angels who helped me through the day. They walked me through the storms and they set me on my way. Oh, I run from the darkness. I'm still a fool in the night. One thing I've learned as my fortunes have turned is to always follow the light. And I'll always follow the light. Always follow the light. I was born on a tugboat, coming into a Baptist missionary camp on the west coast of Vancouver Island, the second child of Simone and Handsome Jack. The camp was called Esperanza, hope. I tell that to my mother. My dad loved to live in nature. Unfortunately, he was a logger, so he destroyed nature for a living. Loggers those days got their work in Skid Row hotel bars, which suited my dad fine because he liked to drink. You have to be drunk to sign up for the kind of work he did. Skid Row was the only part of the city I knew. Me and my older brother Randy would sit in the car looking after our little sisters while Dad ran in for just a sec to hustle up a job. Then we would sit for hours with scary faces leering in at us, slithering past the car, cursing and crying and punching each other. At closing time, Dad would finally stagger out and we'd hold on tight for the blackout drive to wherever we happened to be living. We were like wild animals with the wrong set of instincts. We didn't belong anywhere. We moved 27 times, but we never went very far. I'm 15 years old. It's a beautiful Indian summer day. I've climbed up a maple tree. I can see the beach and the low light glistening over the ocean. I'd like to go down and feel the salt air in my lungs, but I can't move from this tree. It's the horse tranquilizers I stole from the hippies I'm living with. I've been stealing speed too, just to stay awake in school. I'm supposed to be at work right now at Brian's Drive-In, but I don't want to go. Last month, I went into the city by myself to buy fabric for my boss to make curtains for him. The only store I knew was the Army and Navy down on Skid Row. Something bad happened. It was violent. Man sees something beautiful, has to spoil it. Like they do with the forest and the oceans. Except this was my body. The memory of it covers my mind like an oil slick. I didn't tell anyone. I used to tell my older brother everything, but he's been having mental problems, and I don't want to trouble my mom, so I've just gone into the woods to die. Except I don't really want to die. I just want to go down to the beach. I just my legs are numb. My head is pressed into rotting leaves. Ants are carrying bits of me back to their babies. Will I become ant food? Will the crows eat my eyes? Oh. My mom was above me in a cloud. I thought maybe I was in heaven. But then she said, "How are you feeling, Barb?" I knew no one would call me Barb in heaven. I was in the hospital for a bit. Quit school, 10th grade, stopped firing. Just felt like my life was at a dead end. And then my old English teacher showed up. He had started a theater company, and he wanted me to play the lead in Tennessee Williams' Suddenly Last Summer. I was like, me? Why? I couldn't imagine. But then I started to read it. Catherine Hawley had been locked up in a mental hospital. Well, by then my brother, Randy, had been locked up in a mental hospital too. I think he just couldn't live up to the manly expectations of handsome Jack. I felt his pain. I felt Catherine's pain and confusion. We're all of us children in a vast kindergarten, trying to spell God's name with the wrong alphabet blocks. It was my truth inside somebody else's words, a safe way to express myself. Well, we took that play to the Provincial Drama Festival, and I won Best Actress. It was suggested that I apply for theater school, but you had to have graduated high school. I lied my way into an audition. I have a letter here from your principal. Oh, shit. I was going to get kicked out. He says you would have graduated this year, but all the records were destroyed in a fire. Uh-huh. So you burned down your school, did you? No. No. I couldn't believe it. I was not a model student. My principal just threw me a lifeline. Anytime you're ready. They devoured parts of him, torn bits of him away, and stuffed them into those fierce little gobbling black mouths of theirs. It was a little over the top. Thank you very much, Barbara. Do you have anything maybe funny? Just the death scene from Romeo and Juliet. Thank you. But I got in. The theater company raised tuition for me, and they set me up with this family in a very nice part of Vancouver. And all I had to do was lighthouse work in exchange for room and board. At school, I was learning how to speak and move on stage, how to sword fight and do mime and yoga and doing plays, lots of plays, and just playing, finally. News came to me that my brother had disappeared from the mental hospital. I thought maybe he had taken a ferry home and jumped off and drowned. When I was acting, I could just get away from everything. One of the teachers at school uh, who had cast me in a lot of things, he invited me to join his theater company, which was another lifeline because I didn't have the money for next year's tuition. So over the next 5 years, I did 25 plays. It was like school without a net, just glorious. Around the end of that time, my brother reappeared. He was worse than ever. His face was gaunt. His eyes had lost all hope. I wanted to help him, but I didn't know how. I could only help myself. I had to leave. I booked a job in Toronto, and I packed up all my belongings in my car, and I was just going to drive it over to my mom's place and give everything to Randy. The night before I left, I had a nightmare where I stabbed and killed my brother. I woke up and my car was gone. Some little shits had taken it for a joyride and ditched it. And so at 5 a.m., in the pouring rain, I'm wrapped in a sleeping bag on a bus to an impound station on Skid Row. Some drunk puked a little too close to me, so I gave him my sleeping bag. I don't mind drunks. They're harmless, unless, of course, they're raising you. I got my car back. They had stripped it of everything. They even took the windshield wipers off, and I am driving like a maniac, the blinding rain, and I get to my mom's place, and there's a sign on the door. I don't want to go near. I know it's bad. It turns out my brother had shot himself that morning and died just before I got there. I asked for an open coffin, even though I'm afraid to look at what's inside. But my brother would dare me, and I can never pass up one of his dares. His face is perfect. It's an idealized version from someone who didn't know him. They've rearranged his expression, undone all his living, pulled the worms from his mouth. Somehow this final death is softer than the rigor mortis of his last few years, all stiff back and soul dying. He looks so dignified in the suit my mom bought, a suit fit for the man he never became. Dark windows, broken sidewalks, a rainstorm at dawn. Before the morning breaks on me, hoping I'll be gone. Going to a brighter place, I hope I find my way. But hope feels more like creeping. Whoa, maybe it's the rain. Goodbye, stranger, my best friend. All our happy trails have come to this dead end. I'll be back, but I can't say when. And even though it makes me blue, I'll still miss the rain. Misfits in the morning, down the Skid Row lane, wasted from the night before, puddled in the rain, looking for a rainbow in a sky that's always gray, hoping that their luck will change if they stay another day. Goodbye, stranger, my best friend. All our happy trails have come to this dead end. I'll be back, but I can't say when. And even though it makes me blue, I'll still miss the rain. And even though it makes me blue, I'll still miss the rain. So I got to Toronto. Note to self, if you're going to be a week late for rehearsals, let the theater know. They had replaced me. I had no job, no money, no friends. I found a bicycle in the alley. I fixed it up, and I spent my days just riding around the city. In Yorkville, there was this pretty Victorian house with flower boxes out front and a baby grand piano in the window. There was something so calming about that place. Well, I got a play, then I got a guy to cling to, the dark cloud. He was gloomy, but he was handsome, antisocial, but he was kind. He bought me clothes because I had nothing. I was a total waif, and he was a total cheater. One night, I just lost it. He locked me out of his place, and I just took my fist and I put them through his door. 23 stitches to remind me of my misguided passion. The doctor who took them out recommended me to a therapist. So I got on my bike and pedaled over. But I'd never been to therapy before, and I sort of lost my nerve. But then I saw it was the house with the window boxes and the piano. Therapist was this funny little guy with a toupee. Something about him, he just had me talking about the rape and my shame and suicide and guilt and my constant loneliness. He said, "What makes you feel good, Barbara?" Music takes me to another place. I like to sing. Yeah? Well, what do you got? So he went over to the piano, and at this point, I'll be tinkering on the piano, but... Don't offend me, do not hurt me. I was gentle, but now I bite. I can't be cruel, got no ground room. Bite off your nose just for spite. What was I thinking? Was I thinking when I fell for this stupid lie? He wasn't kindness, it was blindness. And he can't look in my eyes. I am walking in the desert. I'm drifting over the sand. I'm holding up my honor. Somebody's holding my hand. I'm falling with the cool rain. I'm fading into the sound. I'm mixing into the texture of the tree and the rock and the ground. Singing became my therapy. You know, if you feel bad, just do something that makes you feel good. Like one day, it's sunny outside, and I say, let's go walking. And we're walking along, and the doctor says, what, do you think you've ever felt love? And I say, no, I think I have a jaded heart. And just then, I look down in the grass, and it's a heart-shaped piece of jade. Now, you have to wonder when things like that happen. You know, I started to think about leaving. I wanted to go someplace far, far away, and abracadabra, I got a movie shooting in Israel. It was my first leading role, my first time abroad. After 4 nights, wide awake in my Tel Aviv hotel room, I go out to a store, thinking maybe a bottle of red wine will help me sleep. I muddle through the shekels in Hebrew, and then I'm going out the door, and the bag breaks. And I'm pouting over these shards of glass in a red puddle. And the owner brings over a broom and a dustpan. I can't believe it. Then this old man walks by me and he says something in Hebrew. What did he say to me? He said, "At least it's not blood." That was a good lesson, but not good enough to keep me from falling for my mad prince. My co-star had a face like a Michelangelo sculpture. Michelangelo hands, beautiful voice. He spoke several languages. He had this funny walk. I was deeply in love, and he was deeply in love with himself too. Something we had in common. We met up at in Paris. We stayed at this hotel under the Basilique du Sacré-Cœur. Everything French resonated with me. My mother's mother was French. I never met her, but it was in my blood. Then he took me to Hollywood and marooned me at the Chateau Marmont. He went off to do a film. It wasn't a bad place to be marooned, but I had no reason to be there. I just felt alone in a strange city. I'd spend my days walking along Sunset Boulevard feeling like I was disappearing. Everybody was famous, like Robert De Niro was sipping an espresso, and I'd come nose to nose with Sting. I started to feel so alienated and lonely, and I got the urge to jump off a building. And then I remembered seeing this sign on Robertson Boulevard, Jane Fonda workout. I hopped in a cab, ran down to the place. I sign in, and then these people come streaming out, beautiful, sweaty people, and I start to feel like I'm disappearing again. And then I hear, "I like your boots." It was Jane Fonda. I got them in Montreal. "Oh, êtes-vous française?" Her sapphire eyes just sparkled. She was all flushed and dewy. Non, ma grand-mère était française. Alors, amusez-vous. Au revoir. Au revoir. She whooshed out the door. It was the first time since I'd come to Los Angeles that I felt seen by somebody. So I did a sweaty class. Boom, boom, boom. And I felt so good in my body. I kept going back. I never saw her there again, but she did keep me from jumping off a building. Oh, this is the theme song from the first big studio film I did. It's not all I dreamed about, but I did like making money. In the meantime, the Mad Prince and I were having daily explosions of rage and implosions of hurt. It was just mad, hellish love. So what did we do? We bought a house by the ocean. And I got work in Pennsylvania, had to keep that money rolling in. Mad Prince came to visit me because he was jealous of my co-star. First night he gets there, we're driving from the set, and we get T-boned by a drunk driver. We're wrapped around a tree, upside down. The Mad Prince is lying on my lap with a head wound. He looks up and says, "I love you, Barbara. Tell my mother I love her. Will you marry me?" He's bleeding from the head. He could die on my lap. What am I supposed to say? Not a good idea. He survived, and we got married, and after a few betrayals, he ran off with a lovely young British model. I was absolutely devastated, but once again, work saved me. I was doing a film in Cincinnati, playing a tough-talking New Jersey waitress. And then the Mad Prince, he calls me, says, "Hey, our anniversary's coming up. You know, maybe we should have dinner." I think, what? Does he want to get back together again? And me, being the fool that I am, I fly back to LA. And just before we meet, I decide I should go down to our favorite Korean spa. So I'm sitting there in the hot pool, and there, getting out of the cold plunge, is the lovely young British model. Well, I turn into the Wicked Witch of the West. I back her into the corner. I say, "Live by the sword, die by the sword, my pretty." And she's like slipping down this beam going, "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." Well, that was it, except for one finishing touch. When I was leaving through the lobby, the elevator doors opened, and there behind two men in suits are the Mad Prince and the model. Blame it on New Jersey. I walk up and men are going, "Ah!" Anyway, that was that. He never came home, and I was alone one more time. I just felt like jumping off a cliff. But look at this ocean. Look at the beautiful place I live in. Why would I ever abandon myself? I am woman. Something like that. Then there's a sign. There's a sign here that says, Tom Hayden, Democrat. I met Tom at a Raymond Carver short story reading. I didn't know much about him, or the Port Huron Statement, or Students for Democratic Society, or his involvement in the Civil Rights Movement, or the Chicago Seven. I did know that he had been married to Jane Fonda. Afterwards, I was sitting with a group of theater people, and he was going on about the current political scene, and he was just so quick-witted and funny. His hands were very emphatic, sort of square and elegant, yet, yeah. And then he had this bow-legged walk, grounded, like ready to spring into action, just radiated confidence and strength. He was different. When I was driving away, Tom came looming out of the fog on a bicycle, inches from my headlights. I almost killed Tom Hayden before I got to know him. He was a self-proclaimed spy, catcher in the rye, making trouble on unsacred ground. A suited up rebel, out to be devil, the powers he aimed to bring down. I remember that night when he stopped on his bike and we shared our love of wild things. I have to confess, it's when I liked Tom the best. Oh, the outlaw with tattered wings. He was always in flight, the first call of the night from a troubled man needing a hand. He stood up to the bastards, all the disasters. He stood up till his legs couldn't stand. I remember that night when he stopped on his bike and we shared our love of wild things. Have to confess, it's when I liked Tom the best. Oh, the outlaw with tattered wings. I was going out of town to work, and Tom invited me to stop by on my way to the airport. When I got there, he was elbow deep in the dirt planting lavenders. A look, I believe, was staged to impress me because I never saw him gardening again. We sat in a little tree house sipping tea, and he described a class on deep ecology that he was going to be teaching. It was a comparative study of different religions and how they viewed the earth. I told him all about my dad, who knew all about the cycles of nature and loved to live in the wilderness, but destroyed it and himself to make a living. My dad had broken his back, wrenched his fingers, ruined his knees, busted his teeth, all for the logging industry. And what did he have to show for it? Countless injuries and battle stories told over too many mugs of beer. Tom shared with me that he was a year sober. Just then, felt a kerfuffle in my hair, and a squirrel ran down the rail. Tom said, "That's a sign you're my nature girl." I didn't know the term deep ecology, but I understood what it meant. But my whole life had just been about getting through my childhood, my teen years, getting my next job, paying my rent, just surviving. And Tom had me thinking about the survival of the earth. I started to link the ravage of my life with the ravage of the earth. The personal became political. Tom and I became a couple. Tom was a visionary. He saw straight ahead and around corners. That's what Jane Fonda said. He inspired so many people to partake in their governance. He also pissed a lot of people off. Among them was a stalker who had been apprehended, armed to the gills, and he had just been released from prison, so the Senate provided a security detail to safeguard Tom. During that time, a man sleeping in front of Tom's house was observed in a truck. Would that be a blue Dakota truck with British Columbia license plates? That would be my dad. Well, Dad was sitting in the side saddle, having his first smoke of the day. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Senator." "Oh, please, call me Tom." "Puh. If I was a senator, I would insist on never being called anything but." "Listen, I appreciate camping here, but if it's a bother, I can go down to the beach." "Oh, no bother at all, Jack. Why don't you come in for a coffee?" I'm all coffeeed up, but I could sure use a hot bath. Took one in the Salinas River yesterday, and I'm still feeling the chill. And mindful of the drought, I will just rinse out my clothes in the bath water. "It's your lucky day, Jack. We got a washing machine." "Okay, and listen, if you need any heavy lifting, I'm available for, say, $5 an hour." "I'm sure you're worth more than that, Jack." "Oh." Well, Dad was feeling down in the dumps because his last marriage had gone to the dogs, but not before she racked up his credit card. Now he was broke. While he was humming away in the bathtub, Tom wanted to know more about him, specifically his ethnicity, like those high cheekbones and that dark skin and black hair. As far as I knew, Dad was Scottish and Scandinavian on his mother's side, and on his father's side, he was Welsh and Lakota. Lakota, grandmother apparently. Well, to Tom, Native American cosmology was the salvation of the earth. He would have married me right then and there just to have connection to the Lakota. Dad certainly did not revere the Lakota ways, but Tom saw Native nobility. He set him up in the laundry room. He had a futon and he put an old TV on top of the dryer, and Dad was fascinated by the Jerry Springer Show. He said it gave him the keenest insight into American culture. And then he would sit and watch it with Tom's housekeeper while she ironed, and they'd share cigarettes. He made friends with Tom's dog, Travis, and found a weed dealer, and he was set. There was a homeless guy down in the corner, and Dad used to share stories with him about the Korean War. Oh, he'd just had a few missteps, found himself without a place to live, and it's been downhill ever since. Then he brought the guy home for a bath and a shave. Well, the guy was a sad mess. But Dad could relate. He took some pants and shirt and underwear out of Tom's laundry and slipped it to him while he was splashing away in the bath. He came out an hour later, years of shame just washed away. The guy left a pile of junk at the corner and we never saw him again. Dad had no propriety when it came to other people's possessions. "Is that another one of my shirts your dad's wearing?" Tom would ask. Now, Tom had no attachment to clothes, but as a senator, he had to wear a clean shirt every day. So he just to steer Dad away from his dress shirts, he laid out his many, many ties and told Dad to just take his pick. Soon, every daytime drinker in the neighborhood was wearing a Tom Hayden tie. Even the Vietnam vet down at Lincoln and Rose was sporting one. "Ask him if he's registered to vote," Tom said. Then one day, I just get an up before dawn note from Dad. "Always a pleasure to indulge in your generosity," it says. "Thanks to Tom. Oh, P.S. I hope Tom doesn't mind that I've taken his dog to be my road companion." I was doing a movie in Vancouver Island, themes of redemption, peak of Indian summer when the leaves are at their brightest, but in an instant will die into the wet gray sulk of West Coast winter. I'd been spending time with my mom, hadn't seen her for a long time. She'd never gotten over my brother's death. She was in the house when he shot himself. "My tears are stuck here," she said. I was so grateful that I could express my grief. Mom just carried around that stagnant grief. That's why I stayed away for so long. I got this idea that we should do a reset. I wanted to take Mom back to that place in Esperanza where she gave birth to me on that tugboat. I chartered a float plane, and then Mom just went dark. She was unreachable, gone. The phone keeps on ringing. I know that she's home. She never goes out. She's always alone. I'm just checking in. There's not much to say. I'm just trying to stop her from fading away. Let's pretend that we're close. In the mornings we'll walk, we'll sit by the ocean. We don't have to talk. Let's pretend you like dogs and still love to dance. That you stepped out your door, traveled to France. Let's pretend you spoke French and went back to the town where your mother was born, your father went down. Dis-moi que tu m'aimes on a French battleground. Oh shit, I forgot that. I can't hold on forever. I won't let you go. And though you won't answer, I think that you know I've learned how to love. I send it to you. I hope you receive it. It's the best I can do. So Tom went with me instead.
I get terrible motion sickness, so I always try to keep my eye on the horizon to level me. But they kept being pulled away by these massive landslides on the mountains where they had clear cut all the trees. When I was little, forest just seemed infinite, but from this vantage point, it was glaringly finite. I felt nauseous. I put my head down, and Tom slipped me a birthday card. "Will you marry me?" it said. Before I could respond, we had to make an emergency landing so I could throw up. Oh. But I said yes. I liked the idea of being married to a senator. It would make me feel more legitimate. I set the wedding in Clayoquot Sound, which was a hotbed of anti-logging environmentalists. I rounded up a Buddhist priest and indigenous shaman artist to officiate. My friend John from theater school came with his family. People arrived on whale skiffs. People in the area who I didn't know, they brought gooey ducks and vegetables and salmon that they wove cedar strips through and smoked around a fire. It was great. My dad was high and happy as a clam. My mom was miserable. "Why can't you do anything normal with me?" Like I had the most normal role models. I sang my wedding vows, which I will never do again. The next day, Tom and his son left on a father-son trip to Alaska before his son went to college, and I stood on a massive blockade to stop logging trucks from going into pristine forest. That was our honeymoon. Pretty much set the tone of our marriage. The next birthday, I got arrested, chained to the headquarters of GTE, protesting using old-growth pulp to make yellow pages. Tom was very proud of me. The next time I saw my dad, he was in the hospital. His cancer was inevitable. All that red meat, drinking, and smoking. They neutered me, he said. It was like losing a beloved dog that bit small children. He said it himself. All they ever did was get me in trouble. Turns out he had 9 kids. 2 of them I'd never heard of. He reminisced about hopping the boxcars, working his way west. The harder the work, the more bones he broke, the more noble it was. It was because of his work that people had homes to live in. Not that he ever had home. No. Tom got this grand notion to take us on an odyssey to find Dad's relations in South Dakota. Dad said he'd go for the buffalo. We drove to the Crazy Horse Memorial that's carved into the Black Hills outside of Custer. The guy at the ticket booth was counting heads, and he looked at Dad and he said, "Oh, sir, are you Native American?" Dad said, "Yes." He said, "Well, then it's free for you and your family." Dad said, "Well, that's the first time I'd ever paid to be Indian." Then we went to Pine Ridge and we met Charlotte Blackout. She took a shine to Dad and she invited him to the Sundance. Well, there was not a hope in hell that Dad would go dance with half-naked, half-starved vision questers tearing open their flesh under the blazing hot sun in a blood sacrifice to Mother Earth. But I would.
A Devil's Tower. The dancers are singing and rattling, keening their invocations to Wankan Tonka in a blur of feathers and buffalo hide. They pray for strength to fulfill vows, to atone for misdeeds. Then they take shards of buffalo bones and they pierce them through the sinews in their backs. And they're attached to 6 buffalo skulls. And they drag those buffalo skulls until the flesh tears. Women are not expected to tear their flesh because they give their blood to sacrifice to Mother Earth when they give birth. But we can give our flesh offerings. So I stepped up. They take a needle, they pierce your skin, and then they lop it off with a scalpel. I did it 4 times on both shoulders, 1 for each member of my family. Charlotte Black Elk said, "The Sundance is powerful medicine. You'll see." And sure enough, Dad's cancer went into remission. He was feeling spunky enough to bring home a young woman, younger than me. She had black hair, black eyes, pale skin. She was kicking a heroin habit, and Dad said he was going to watch over her, like the fox guarding the hen house. She was from a wealthy Beverly Hills family. I could not figure out what she was doing with a broken-down old logger. But he took her to Canada, married her, and she got health care. Then they got an apartment, and then she kicked him out, him and his dog. Dad called me saying there was an old fishing trawler that he'd like to live on and fix up, so I bought it for him. At that time, Tom was running for mayor of Los Angeles. I was doing my best to be a good political wife, but Tom was not doing his best to be a good husband. We'd hit a rough patch. He got trounced in the election. The next day, I got a phone call from my sister saying Dad was in very bad shape. And then the next phone call was a job up in Vancouver. So I flew up. Dad, it was June. Dad said he had till August. The wife took him back in, depleted him of his morphine, then dumped him at emergency, where he went into palliative care. I begged him to divorce this woman so that my mom would get his pension. But he pointed out then the previous wife would get his pension. And anyway, surprise, surprise, him and my mom were never married, of course. I got another job out east in Toronto, and Dad said he'd hold on till I got back. But a week before filming ended, he called saying it was time to catch the boxcar. I flew out immediately, sat up at midnight with him in the hospital. At some point, I sort of drifted off. I woke up and he said something. I woke up and I was holding his hand. I'd never held my dad's hand before. It was smaller than I thought. A cute little nurse came bustling in, changing his IV. She felt his pulse, and then she suddenly got teary. Oh dear, your father's died. Oh, he was such a devil, always giving me candy when he knew I was trying to lose weight. The funeral was being held. As the same day in the funeral, the funeral in the movie I was doing, the director said he'd get a double for me. I hadn't packed for a funeral, so I dug into my character's wardrobe. The one black dress was going to be worn by my double. The best I could come up with was a horrible polyester red pantsuit. Put it on, flew west. Outside the chapel, the smokers looked more like a Salvation Army bread line than a funeral party. Tom was waiting on the stairs. He could have shown up with a chorus of strippers and I would have been happy to see him. He had flown up. I'd asked him to do the eulogy. Never seen you in red, he said. He took my hand. We went in, looked over the crowd. My sister was wearing a black silk jacket and pants that I had given to her. My mom was wearing a beautiful beige coat that I bought for her new. The wife was wearing a hat she stole from me. Everybody hushed when Tom went up to do the eulogy. He lauded Dad as a character out of a Kerouac novel. You know, though his work was becoming obsolete, men like Jack could never be automated. He elevated the whole event. I looked over at my mom. She was smiling serenely. I wondered if she was remembering happier times, maybe during fire season when Dad was off work and we'd all go down to the beach and he'd swim way out past the horizon. Mom would be standing waiting with the towel to dry him off. And then they'd sit like teenagers close together. Dad would be puffing on a smoke and Mom would be wiping buttered bread on her legs to quicken her tan. She could only have this moment of loving Dad without him around to mess it up. Outside, the divvying of the ashes was going on. I felt like a drug dealer putting this powder in baggies and giving it to his friends. Mom went out on the boat to where they spread the rest of the ashes. She said they blew back in her face and stuck in the back of her throat, along with her uncried tears. Some years later, I was doing a location scout for a film that I had written. I was back down on Skid Row. I was taking pictures, and these two people came shuffling by, this woman in a lopsided platinum wig and an indigenous guy. They were doing the junkie shuffle. Put my camera down, and the woman looked up at me. There was something about that face, the pale skin, the black eyes. Then she sat down and stared up at me. The director said, "Oh, the poor thing, she thinks she knows you." She was my dad's last wife. His whole pension went right up her arm. I heard she died shortly after that. Yep. I dreamed I was walking at the edge of the earth. I could see the arc of the globe, and there were bleachers, and people were sitting watching the sky. And then suddenly this black helicopter came plowing across the sky, and it started to go out of control. And then these two little figures crawled out from either side, and they threw a golden orb off. And then the helicopter exploded, and the golden orb kept spinning across the sky. So I ran and ran and ran, and I got under it, and I saw that it was a baby. I kept running and running and running, and then it landed in a field in this young girl's arms. She held the baby out to me and said, "It's for you." I knew this was a prophetic dream, but what did it mean when a plane crashed? No, it was an adoption dream. I started the process. And then Christmas Eve day, I got a call from this young girl. She was 5 months pregnant. She already had a 16-month-old. She was white. The biological father was black. And there was just something about her voice. I knew she was the one. Mid-March, we got a she's in labor call. Tom and I flew out. Tom sat in the waiting room with her son cradled on his lap, and I was in with her mother. We both held one hand. At 2:29 a.m., the baby emerged. I cut the cord. It was extraordinary. Tom went back to the Senate, and I went back to the motel room with this newborn, and I was in a panic. Every few minutes, I would check under his nose to see if he was still breathing. I couldn't sleep. I was just terrified. What was I thinking? And then on the fourth day, I finally put all the bottles and the plastic bottles and rims and nipples in this dinky little dishwasher in the corner of the room, and I fell asleep. And I dreamed that the baby just dissolved and disappeared down a drain. I woke up and the baby was wailing away, and the room was filled with acrid black smoke. It turns out the nipples had fallen on the heating ring and caused some kind of short. Anyway, they moved me to another room. Then the birth mom, she called me and asked if I wanted to have dinner. Well, I was eager to get out of that room and eat something other than stale cornflakes. She lived in a cramped little apartment with her mom and her son and her stepdad, a pipe fitter in a nuclear power plant. He stuck a radiated finger into my baby's cheek, said, "Well, looks like you got lucky here. Not too dark." We sat in front of the TV with our TV trays piled high with pork chops and mashed potatoes. There was a news item about how these black workers had walked out of work demanding equal wages to white workers. The pipe fitter sat there saying, they don't want to work. They're just lazy. They're just looking for any excuse not to work. Lazy, 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 like her guy. Oh, look at her. Oh, she still loves him. Listen, don't get me wrong, but her guy, he's a real, and he dropped the N-word. That was a gift. I just walked over to my baby, who I called Liam, and held him close. I knew why I was there. In that moment, I became a mother. When Liam was a year old, no, he was still an infant, Tom got termed out of the Senate. And we were, just a short time later, we were visiting Jane at a ranch outside of Santa Fe, and Tom had a heart attack. I sat up with Jane and Eve Ensler, author of the Vagina Monologues. We're talking about relationships, and I got a real dose of female empowerment. Why did I always cling to men? My mentors and my tormentors. Eve looked at me and she said, you don't give yourself enough credit for how strong you are. It was time to change my story. Tom had a quintuple bypass. It held for a good stretch, but Tom's work was always more important than his health. He played baseball, but not for exercise. It was more about, he had some field of dreams, romanticism about his dad looking down, watching him, being proud of him. He was such an American, including his love of hot dogs and hamburgers. Yeah. His work was just more important. He sacrificed his body to change the world. When Liam was 15, Tom came home from doing an investigation of fracking in the Central Valley. He was piling up his plate with food, and I said, "Easy there." And he said, "Where's my fork?" I said, "Well, it's right beside your plate." He said, "No, I just had a fork. Where is it?" I said, "Tom, it's right beside your plate." And he said, "Where are you?" They call this a neglect stroke. You can see, you just don't understand what you're seeing in that field of vision. It was a battle to get him to do his rehab. He had one more book that he had in his head. Sometimes he just looked like a giant head hunched over his computer while his body was disappearing. He wrote beautiful books. He wrote beautiful books about nature. And I learned from those books, but I learned more from being in nature, from being integrated with nature. Yeah. He finished 2 books that year, and he even managed to go to the Democratic Convention. He was convinced he was going to be heralding the first female president into U.S. history. He collapsed then, and that was the last time he walked. Later, he was eating pancakes at home, and he choked. 911 walked me through the Heimlich maneuver. That was the last time he ate. In the hospital, people came to embrace him, to sit up with him, to read to him. Tom was very much a fallen Catholic, but he wanted people to pray with him. I think he was just hedging his bets in case, his parents he might be reunited with his parents up there. Yeah. Jane came in to do a round of needed forgiveness. And every day the room was filled with people close to him, people he had mentored, people he worked with, saved from prison, from destitution, from deportation. He was a man of the people. We got the call that it was time. We went down. We thought he was gone. But then Liam sat down beside Tom and held his hand, and he said, "I love you, Dad." And the life came back to Tom. He smiled, and he stayed on for 2 more days. Father Boyle, founder of the Homeboys, a close ally of Tom's, a true man of God who he equated with love. He came to do a blessing. Tom whispered, "I even forgive Trump." And Father Boyle said, "Well, then I know you're ready for heaven." And he was. He had put in his time. Yeah. October 23rd, 2016. Everybody went out to eat, and I laid my head beside Tom. Tom was straining to speak. "Are we safe?" he said. I didn't know what he meant, but I put my hand on his and I said, "We're safe." His eyes shifted to the hall. He felt something coming. The world was going to change. It was bad. He saw around the corner. Suddenly he said, his mouth formed the words, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." There have been 3 events in my life that brought about profound changes when I was holding the hand of someone dear to me. When my dad took his last breath, all the blame and resentment I held for the woes of my childhood just fell away. When Liam's birth mother went into labor and I saw his head crowning, I experienced unconditional love for the first time. When the life left Tom, I felt like it was me leaving, like I was being sucked backwards through a tunnel. I had to make a sound, to bring me back into the room. Along with my own grief, I felt a collective grief for all the people whose lives he had changed. President Obama wrote me a beautiful letter. The last line of it reads, "Tom's spirit lives on in the generations of young people who are guided by his commitment to that most American of values. The people who love their country can change it." A silent no becomes a yes. Hope turns into hopelessness. When the very good have stopped their quest, the very worst are called the best. Push that rock to the top of the hill. Falling down, and you push it still. Push that rock. It's all that you can do when you know that rock is rolling back on workers all like Sisyphus. Take the weight for all of us. That rock, you know, rolls back on us, back on us, back on us. Who will come to right the wrong? Tireless ones who they belong. And what they were, they sing this song, because that rock has made them strong. Push that rock, push that rock to the top of the hill. Falling down as you push it still. Push that rock, it's all that you can do when you know that rock is rolling back on you. When you know that rock is rolling back on you. When you know that rock is rolling back on you. Push that rock, push that rock, push that rock. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to know what's essential. Sometimes you have to leave everything you know to see it for the first time. Ta-da!